Yeah, I've just started streaming, so we'll be live in a few seconds. Yeah, we are live now.
Great. Thank you very much, Utkarsha. Good evening, afternoon, day, or morning, everyone, wherever you are right now watching us. That's a weekly Tuesday Product People community event. If you're first time here, maybe you're wondering who are Product People and what we do. Product People, we are a company, product management consultancy, but also a community builder. So as a community builder, we create these weekly events every Tuesday and also sometimes on Thursdays to invite the best product managers and share their wisdom and their tips with you. As a consultancy in product management, we do hands-on and glamorous work of product manager and product owner on the interim basis. Usually it's between 2 to 12 months. We also can do this consultancy stuff with some pretty decks, but we do prefer to deliver outcomes whenever that's possible, or to however it's possible. So we work as interim product managers in different companies. We have a fully distributed team with a legal entity in Berlin, and we work right now remotely from several places around Europe. Among our clients are some companies that you probably know, especially if you live in Germany. It's Scout24, Tier, Dr. Smile, Heycar, Omeo, Zalando, and we are open for new projects at the moment as we are growing the team. So if you know some cool companies that would benefit of having an interim product manager, please let us know. We also have a referral bonus if you're interested. And as I said, we're growing the team, so there are also slots inside of the team to join us. We have a product manager position open at the moment. If you're considering this kind of work, please check us on Join. So it's productpeople.join.com. You can read more about what we're looking for and what kind of people we're looking for. With this, I will stop sharing my screen and take us to our guest of tonight, who is Artabaz. He's the VP of Product at BlaBlaCar, and he will share with us how to be an impactful product manager and what are the important habits that you want to have in such a position, or to reach such a position, I guess. Welcome, Artabaz.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction and for the invitation. So I hope you can see my screen and everything is working.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Well, so hi everyone, I'm glad to meet you. So as was said, I'm a VP of product at BlaBlaCar, where I'm in charge of the driver experience. And today I'm here to tell you about what I call the 4 habits of impactful product managers. And so before we go into it, I'd like to tell you why actually I created this framework or these habits. The reason I created it is because I noticed that for the many PMs that I've encountered or managed, there's always a key preoccupation, which is around growing and around, okay, how can I have more impact in my organization, in my projects? And often I see product managers overly focused on tools. So, is there a new tool, a better tool that I can use? And actually, I think that we overinvest, or we focus too much on tools, while we should be focusing a bit more on habits. And so today, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to, thanks to a movie, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how 4 habits can make you a more impactful product manager. So I had written on LinkedIn that it would be a famous movie from the 1950s. I don't know if anyone actually guessed or has a guess about what the movie would be. You can write it in the chat box if you do.
Yeah, please write in the chat if you have a guess. We will give you a bit of time. Or not, well, I think you just spoiled it.
I think I spoiled it.
Gave a spoiler, okay. Well,
because
if you
there
guess,
is a delay. So anyway, so the movie is 12 Angry Men, and so that's it. That's a great movie from the 50s. If you haven't watched it, definitely go and watch it after this talk. And although it's an old movie, it contains super valuable insights and a live example about how to be an impactful PM. So what is the plot of the movie? Actually, it's pretty simple, and it's about a jury that has to decide something. And basically, what happens is that we have an 18-year-old boy that is accused of premeditated murder on his father. During the trial, we see that there is overwhelming evidence. So that's really the start of the movie. The end of the trial. So there's overwhelming evidence. There is one eyewitness that has seen the boy. So it seems pretty obvious. And what is at stake is that because we are in the US in the 1950s, is for the boy the electric chair. So basically the boy is risking his life. And there is a jury of 12 men who need to decide unanimously whether the boy is guilty or not. Okay, so it's a story of a jury that is given a lot of information and now have to sit in a room, just the 12 of them, and agree unanimously on a decision that will end or not the boy's life. Throughout this presentation, I will show you 4 extracts of the movie. So you will see four parts of the movie, not the whole movie, that will illustrate the 4 habits that I want to share with you. And so we're going to start without further waiting with the first one. What is the first habit? So actually, when the jury enters the deliberation room and that they start to discuss, they quickly decide to organize what I like to call a warm-up vote. So the idea is to try to understand, okay, we've seen the trial, we've seen some evidence, we know there's a witness. What is the conviction of everyone? Where does everyone stand regarding the guilt of the boy? And so what happens is that 11 people immediately raise their hand and say, okay, I think the boy is guilty. And just one actually raises their hand. It's taking a bit of time to come, but it's coming. Just one person raises their hand and says that they think the boy is not guilty. And of course, the reaction from the 11 others is bewilderment. And it's just to ask, why? Why do you think that the boy is not guilty? And so here we go to our first excerpt where we're going to look at this conversation.
See it. He's 18 years old. Well, that's old enough. He stabbed his own father 4 inches into the chest. They proved it a dozen different ways in court. Would you like me to list them for you?
No. Then what do you want? I just want to talk.
Well, what's there to talk about? 11 men in here think he's guilty. No one had to think about it twice except you.
I want to ask you something. Do you believe his story? I don't know whether I believe it or not. Maybe I don't.
So how come you vote not guilty?
Well, there were 11 votes for guilty. It's not easy to raise my hand and send a boy off to die without talking about it first.
Well, now, who says it's easy?
No one.
What, just because I voted fast? I honestly think the guy's guilty. Couldn't change my mind if you talked for 100 years.
I'm not trying to change your mind. It's just that we're talking about somebody's life here. We can't decide it in 5 minutes, supposing we're wrong.
Supposing we're wrong. Supposing this whole building should fall down on my head, you can suppose anything.
That's right.
So what we see in this first extract actually is that one of the heroes in this movie is trying to build empathy. So he's hearing some, rational arguments. He's hearing that, yeah, it's 11 against 1, but he doesn't try to, he's not interested in that at first. He's really trying to just remind everyone that they're discussing a human being and hence building empathy between the jury and the boy. Just after that, there is a discussion and where they ask to ask him to explain more, and actually that discussion is a very confused discussion. It seems that it doesn't lead anywhere. And so they decide, they say, okay, let's take a second vote and let's actually see if anyone has changed their mind. Okay, has anyone among the 11 remaining changed their mind? And if yes, they keep discussing. If not, then it means that he hasn't managed to convince them and he will remain silent. And actually, at that second vote, it turns out that someone else changed their mind very quickly. And then again, they're wondering why. And we're going to look at a second extract here.
Oh, fine.
I know it.
Would you like me to tell you why?
No, I wouldn't like you to tell me why.
Well, I'd like to make it clear anyway, if you don't mind.
Do we have to listen to this?
The man wants to talk.
Thank you. This gentleman has been standing alone against us. Now, he doesn't say the boy is not guilty. He just isn't sure. Well, it's not easy to stand alone against the ridicule of others, so he gambled for support, and I gave it to him. I respect his motives. The boy in trial is probably guilty, but I want to hear more. Right now, the vote is 10-2. I'm talking here. You have no right to leave this
Can't
room.
hear you. Never will. Let's sit down.
And here, so it's that at the end of the second excerpt. And so what we see here is that the old man actually is just helping a minority point of view, an opposite point of view being voiced. So he himself still convinced that the boy is guilty. But that's not important, because what's important for him is actually to make sure that the opinion that hasn't been heard has a chance to be explained and to be shared. So with that, we come to our first, the first habit that I'm going to unveil, and which I called care, and which summarizes, the both points that we've seen about both building empathy and making sure that you enable other voices, minority voices, voices that often, may be neglected, to be heard. Now, moving to the second, I'm sorry, I'm just going to try to present again, because sometimes, it doesn't load better. Yeah. So now moving to the second habit, we're going to move forward in the movie, and we're going to move to the point where the jury examines the eyewitness. So the eyewitness, to understand that, we have to go to the night of the murder, where actually a sound, a scream of the father who was murdered, a scream has been heard in the building by an old man living below. And so the old man claims that he heard a scream, he heard the body fall, then he ran outside and just had time to see the boy running out through the stairs. And so that's a very important testimony, because a testimony that's right at the moment of the murder, we have someone recognizing and seeing the boy. And now let's see how the jury deals with that testimony.
Now, let's see. It's 12 feet from the bed to the door. The hall is 43 feet. He would have had to walk 12 feet, open the bedroom door, walk 43 feet down, and open the front door, all in 15 seconds. You think he could have done it?
Sure he could have done it.
He can walk only very slowly. They have to help him into the witness chair.
You make it sound like a long walk.
For an old man who had a stroke, it is a long walk.
Oh, what are you doing?
I'm going to try it, see how long it took.
What do you mean you want to try it? Why didn't his lawyer bring it up of its own
Well,
force?
maybe he just didn't think about it.
What do you mean didn't think of it? To think a man's an idiot or something, it's an obvious thing.
Did you think of it?
Listen, smart guy, don't matter whether I thought of it. He didn't bring it up because he knew it had hurt his case. What do you think of that?
Maybe he didn't bring it up because it would have meant bullying and badgering a helpless old man. You know that doesn't sit very well with the jury. Most lawyers avoid it if they can.
So what kind of a bum is he then?
That's what I've been asking, buddy. Pass me that chair, will you? Those two chairs are the old man's bed. I just paced off 12 feet across the room. This will be the bedroom door.
Oh, that's crazy. You can't recreate a thing like that.
I would like to see it. 43 feet. I'll pace over that wall and back again.
Look, this is absolutely insane. What are you wasting everybody's time in here for?
According to you, it'll only take 15 seconds. Now, we can spare that, see?
Come on, knock it off.
Okay, killer. Yeah.
Will you stand right there and mark the front door? It was chain locked according to the testimony, remember? Has anybody got a watch for the second hand?
I have.
You want me to start, stamp your foot? That'll be the body falling. You can tie me from there.
What are we going to do, play charades now?
Come on, what are we waiting for?
Well, I want to wait till the second hand reaches 60.
Oh, come on.
Come on, speed it up. He walked twice as fast as that.
If you want me to walk faster than that, I will. Lock, door, stop.
Right.
What's the time?
Exactly 41 seconds.
Here's what I think happened. The old man heard the fight between...
So that was a bit longer excerpt, but very important, because what we see there is that they're examining a very important testimony. And so they really focus on the facts. So for example, they don't try to examine whether, they don't try to discuss whether the old man is reliable, not reliable, etc. They just look at the facts and whether those facts actually make sense given the other facts that they have. And the other thing that they do is that they really try to reconstitute things and try, in person to see if it makes sense. And those two habits are gathered under, the second umbrella, which I called check, which is, to always look for fast facts and try to try things in person instead of, sometimes debating or having theoretical debates, okay? So that was the second habit. Now we're getting to the third one, and the third one is, so it's my personal favorite excerpt of the movie, and favorite habit as well, which is around the weapon of the crime. So actually, what happened? Once they examined the eyewitness, one of the next big charges is around the weapon of the crime, because what happened 2 days before the murder is that the boy went to a shop and was seen coming out with the knife, and that knife was exactly a very similar knife was found plunged, in the body of the father, while the boy apparently had lost his knife. Okay, and so that seemed like pretty confounding evidence, and they are here again discussing whether it is relevant or not, and what they should do with this evidence. So here the excerpt.
What actually happened is this. The boy stayed home, had another fight with his father, stabbed him to death, and left the house at 10 minutes after 12. He even remembered to wipe the knife clean of fingerprints. Now, are you trying to tell me that this knife really fell through a hole in the boy's pocket? Someone picked it up off the street, went to the boy's house, and stabbed his father with it just to test its sharpness?
No, I'm just saying it's possible the boy lost his knife and that somebody else stabbed his father with a similar knife. It's just possible.
Take a look at this knife. It's a very unusual knife. I've never seen one like it. Neither had the storekeeper who sold it to the boy. Aren't you asking us to accept a pretty incredible coincidence?
I'm just saying a coincidence is possible.
And I say it's not possible.
Where did that come from? It's the same knife.
What you're doing?
Where did you get it?
I went out walking for a couple of hours last night. I walked through the boy's neighborhood. I bought that at a little pawn shop just 2 blocks from the boy's house. It cost $6.
It's against the law to buy or sell switchblade knives.
That's right, I broke the law.
Listen, you...
So super interesting extract. What we see here is that even though there is seemingly very strong evidence, first what they do here is that they focus on the key information. So for example, they don't try to build an argument or to discuss why the boy bought a knife or what were his intentions, or the fact that it's against the law to buy a knife, for example, for the boy. So he doesn't try to defend the boy on that part. He really focuses on the key information that because the knife is so unique, then it must be the same as the one that was found on the murder scene. And the second point that we see here is finding a memorable way to illustrate. And I think that on this, it's probably one of the strongest scenes in the movie, where actually, the fact that the knife is not unique, you could imagine like tons of ways of demonstrating it, but just putting a second knife next to it and saying, hey, it just took me 2 hours to find one, is memorable and has a really high convincing power. And so to summarize those two learnings, the acronym that I choose is CRAFT. And so for me, it means like, crafting, great presentations and choosing relevant information, summaries to convince people. We're moving now to the last habit. And for the last habit, so I'm not going to show a movie extract, but just comment on one of the roles among the 12 men, which is a really interesting role. And it's the role of that person who is a bit like we see him as an animator. And what is interesting is that throughout the movie, we never really know what he thinks. We never really know if he thinks the boy is guilty or not guilty. We never really know what he thinks about the different arguments that are made around the room. What we do see is that he is really focused on making sure that people know the rules, that people can vote, that people are heard, and that everything is going well, and that basically that the group, is managing to discuss and managing to move forward with a decision. What is even more interesting with this role is that in the end, this person is part of the 12 jury. So he has to vote and he has to have a conviction and he has to express something. But although he has a vote to emit, it seems that it's not what he focuses on. And what he focuses on is those two things that we see in the movie. First, focusing on helping the group moving forward and making decisions. And second, sorry, I always have to unshare, reminding the rules or sometimes setting rules. For example, how to vote, do we make a public vote, do we make a secret vote, etc. All of that is managed by this person. And then we get to the last habit, which I called Catalyze, and which is for me around how to facilitate a group decision process and how to make sure that the group is moving forward. Now that I've shown you this, we have our 4 habits of impactful product managers: care, check, craft, and catalyze. To finish, I just want to give you a glimpse of on concrete tips on how to use these to grow. I'm sure that as a product manager, you probably have some strengths in the areas that I showed and some natural tendencies to be strong, maybe in caring or in checking, and maybe some weaknesses or blind spots. And I think what's really interesting for each product manager is to do a self-assessment by using this framework and saying, okay, which are my areas of strength and those where I need to develop, and to put in place just one habit at a time, on one area that you're interested in developing. And I'm insisting on one habit at a time because those 4 habits are really difficult to put in place and difficult to basically to live and to put in place efficiently at the same time. They are contradictory. So they stretch you in different directions. So it's really important to put in place one at a time. And so to give you examples of what I've observed, some being good habits that take you in the right direction. On care, I would advise you to organize what I call chats with no aim. So it means, just taking the time. Many of your meetings or encounters with people usually have an objective or there's a specific agenda, and I think it's really important if you want to build empathy either with your colleagues or with your users to regularly have chats and conversations without any aim, actually, just for the sake of hearing what they have to say, hearing how they express it, their feelings, etc. If you're deciding to grow on check, I think my biggest advice would be to try things in person, whether it's checking information, whether it's checking the reality of your product, in trying things in person will yield, a lot of information and a lot of value for you as a product manager. If you're looking to grow on craft, I advise you to do a regular exercise of trying to summarize things, even the most complex ones, and actually maybe mostly the most complex ones, in 5 seconds or in one image. And you will see it is hard. It will take you a lot of time sometimes to condense complex information into one image, but it yields tremendous value to yourself and to your audience. And on Catalyze, sorry, the last advice would be an exercise that you can do in some meetings where you need to take decisions and there are several voices, is try to just not voice your opinion. Try to focus on, okay, how is the process going, and how is everyone being heard? Are we following a proper decision process? Do I need to help add some criteria, bring information, etc., to facilitate the decision? But don't make your opinion and voicing your opinion the center of the topic. So these were some 4 concrete tips to conclude the framework. I want to thank you for your attention, and now I guess we can take questions.
Great, thank you so much, Artabaz. That was an incredible presentation in terms of using another like example outside of our industry or direct industry. I think it was very interesting. I'm sure our guests also appreciate it. So we have not that many people in Zoom, so everyone is welcome to raise your hand if you know how. I hope you do, with the reactions on Zoom, and I will call you and you can then voice your question. And I will also be having an eye for questions in the chat, in Zoom, and on our YouTube. If you want to write a question there, please do. And do we already have some questions ready? Max has a question. Welcome, Max.
Hey everyone, thank you again for the presentation. That was really great and super insightful. I had one question around the Catalyze step in particular, and I was wondering, when you're going about working with a very diverse group of people, it's often quite difficult to make sure every single individual's voice is heard. So I guess my question is, how do you go about, making sure people who don't typically raise their voice as much or are typically more reserved get their opinion across and get their voice actually heard from the group?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it's a problem that we face often. I think that maybe there are two answers to your question. One is that usually as a PM, you have let's say the weight or the authority and in the room to actually be able to help the person speak up, or to make room for them to speak. And I think that's often something that I see, is that just in the way that meetings are organized, people who would be a bit more shy, who don't feel that they have an important voice for whatever reason, would just not even know that they can voice their concern. And so maybe the one thing very simple would be to have a sort of health check of like, okay, has everyone been heard? Has everyone spoken? And I think then the second one is when you hear those voices that are maybe contradictory or minority voices, or that seem to not go in the direction, just try to wonder why. Try to wonder, is it because they're optimizing? Is it because these people are actually liking information? Is it because they're actually have a different objective in mind, a different goal in mind that the rest of the group doesn't have in mind and would be worth sharing? And you will see that actually often in 95% of cases, it's mostly about information not being shared or objective not being shared between different people, than really about a different opinion on the same matter.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thanks for that.
I will read a question from YouTube, which I think is a really, really good one, to the point. How to manage this process when you're tight on a timeline? I mean, all things seem to need time. So how would you go about this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think that actually part of the, let's say, part of the framework is about acknowledging that you need to to judge the situation, but sometimes, yeah, you need to be the person who takes time and who is okay. I mean, yeah, you have deadlines, of course, everything needs to go fast. You have I don't know, stakeholders who are waiting for something to be shipped or to be finished. But that's only part of your job. It's only part of your job to make sure that deadlines are met. A bigger and maybe more important part of the job is to make sure that the job is done properly, that you've done a proper, user research or discovery, or that, if there's actually a doubt on one of the key hypotheses, like, so there's, as we see in the movie, right? I mean, there are some key elements that accuse the boy, but because there's doubt, they spend time, and in the end, because they spend time, they realize that those key elements were wrong. So, and that's a bit what can happen, in product or in many companies. If you go too fast and if you optimize only for the speed of delivery, is that you're going to miss, important insights, and in the end, you won't take the right decision. So I think that it's challenging, and maybe that's why you need to focus on those parts that take time, because they yield value.
Thank you. Now I think you can see how Artabaz came to become a VP of product. So he was also prioritizing the slow but important things. Anand, do you want to voice your questions yourself?
Yeah, why not? Artabaz, first of all, thank you for the brilliant presentation. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I have actually two questions to you. So I recently started in my new position as a product manager, and I'd like to know, whether you have any suggestion on which dimension I should focus. And that's my first question. The second one would be, like, how much time do you estimate that I should spend, or maybe a rough estimate to improve in one dimension?
Okay. That's difficult questions, actually, because I really think that it's a very personal thing, and that let's say you have probably natural strength or natural interest in one of those areas. If you're starting as a product manager, actually, my advice would be maybe try to do first a self-assessment. And if there are things where you think you are strong, well, first, then maybe make sure that, you're actually strong on them and you're solid on that. And then choose on the weak spots or on stuff where you want to improve. How much time to dedicate? I think that one quote that I like about I don't know from who it is, about developing habits, but they say that if you want to develop a habit, it has to be something that's super small. That it has to be so small that you may even think that it's not worth it. But that's a bit. I think the habits that I'm advising, the first steps that I'm advising are still a bit significant, but try to make them small. Basically, it's better, I think, to invest consistently in one habit and see it, pay over time and become something that's then natural, rather than maybe too many of them. Personally, I think that habits about care and check if you're hesitating, I think I would invest a lot in those ones, because they will give you a lot of, information, and they will build a lot your empathy with your colleagues, with your customers, and they will give you maybe let's say strong, convictions, or at least reliable convictions, opinions on what your job should be. So I'd say if you're hesitating, I would start with those.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move to the next question. I read from the chat. A question from Alexei. Who is user's voice representative in your company? at sprint planning meetings? Is it the PM or a business analyst or someone else?
Who is the user's voice?
Who is the user's voice representative? I guess in your experience specifically, and if you have some advice, who should be this person?
So the way we are organized at BlaBlaCar is that in each team there is. So I would say that in the end, like the product manager and the product manager and the UX designers are the two people who have to make the decisions that are the best for the for the user. Then they're not alone in that task. So I think I don't like it's not that I don't like, but I think it's a bit unfair to say that those people are the user's voice, because actually there's a lot of people in the company that contribute to, who interact with users, who contribute to gathering insight, in formalizing them, in making possible the fact that we interact with users. So for example, at BlaBlaCar, we have a research team. So we have people who just spend time sometimes really ahead of the curve on topics on which we don't work, just to discover new user problems. So that's one team that you could say they are also the user's voice, because they spend a lot of time with users doing research, discovering new problems. We have, of course, a big and fantastic customer relation team who spend a lot of time with users, whether being when we launch new features, when new problems appear. And so I think so I would say in the end, it's the responsibility of the PM and the UX in each scope to make sure that they have heard those people, that they've included them in the process. But it doesn't mean that they are the voice. I think that the voice is all the people who interact and then can share user problems.
And for the very tactical sprint planning, is it PM's responsibility to make sure that they know what kind of knowledge we should have prepared for the sprint, or we should have gathered?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So how does the user research team or department work at BlaBlaCar? From what you said, I understood that on one hand, there might be doing something that comes as a request from PMs, but they also do their own research, like drive their own ideas for what should be discovered. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that there's maybe 80 or 90% of their work, which is I think a big share of their work is in close cooperation with PMs and UX designers, basically building with them. Okay, we are gonna work on a new feature on that part of the product. So I'm working on the whole driver experience. So so let's say that we want to improve the way drivers leave ratings, for example. Well, we're gonna try to include and make sure to include the research team from the start in the project and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. These are our hypotheses. This is what we already know about our users. This is what we don't know. And then already at that stage, you could decide whether you want to do some research to better understand the problem. Sometimes you have already a good understanding of the problem, but you want to make sure to include the users in the solution design phase. And then you would do that. And then there are cases where you, I would say, a bit even more, let's say, ahead of the stream and high level. And when you would brainstorm with the research team, like, okay, what are our blind spots about the user journey? Can we, could we just do a much more open research, from the beginning to the end of the journey, if that is even possible. It's not always possible. And find out what problems there are so that we can actually fit the roadmap and identify new ideas. So that's all of the things we can do with the research team. And then for each phase, you can have very different methods. From guerrilla testing, you can do surveys. So that's what the research team is doing. So it's really helping us frame the problems, be in touch with users, and find the right method.
Great, Thank you. Alexei says, thanks for the answer. I'm happy, Alexei, that my additional questions were apparently also helpful. With this, I will take a question from YouTube chat. So in this movie, there is a lot of argument and like sometimes heated argument between people. So as a PM, would you also, the question is, would you go into a collision with a stakeholder or rather try to stay polite and keep everyone happy? If like there seems to be arguments for both directions, what are other important considerations when you decide if you want to create a conflict or not, or enter the conflict? Maybe?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that so in the extracts that that I show from the movie, it's true that so you can see some heated arguments. In the end, I mean, if you watch the movie, I don't think there is one character in the movie that is the PM. You know, I think it's really like interesting attitudes at some points. So I wouldn't say that, hey, if you look at that person, that's the PM. That's not what I mean. I think it's, you know, attitudes, and that's why I've chosen different different extracts of the movie. I think that there I would distinguish, like, you know, how people voice their disagreements and the content, you know, of the disagreement. So I think it's very, very important that as a PM, you manage to have, because you want to get to the, you know, in the end, you want to get, you know, to the bottom, to the content of the disagreement, that you do, you know, whatever you can to make sure that, actually, if there's there is a conflict or a conflict that's in preparation, that you try to avoid it. And I think that by following these habits, I think that part of what they contribute to is to prevent conflict, because if you listen more to people, if you're more focused on, you know, not voicing your opinion, but trying to understand or to shape a decision process that would be good for everyone, that takes everyone, you know, everyone's point of view into account, you should be, you know, decreasing, let's say, the amount of conflicts and misalignment. And I think maybe the one that's the most contradictory with that is regards craft, because craft is, you know, about communication skills and about sometimes maybe, you know, making very bold points, but I don't think it has to be in a conflictual way. So, you know, like the knife scene in the movie, it looks like very, like, you know, he's like planting the knife and making, hey, okay, so I'm right. So I don't think that, you know, the tone is interesting, but just the way the argument is illustrated in a visual way, that's the part I wanted to show.
So you're saying it's a question of how you communicate, and sometimes you probably have to go into a conflict because that's important for the product, or you know that it's important for the user value, that you have to disagree with someone, but that's about the way how you do that.
Exactly. I think that you have to be super comfortable as a PM disagreeing with someone, and you know, and hearing their disagreement and trying to understand why they disagree with you and vice versa, without entering into a conflict. Otherwise, your job is very painful, I think, because it's almost daily. Like your daily job is to be at the center of, you know, people who have different constraints and different expertise and different opinion. So if each misalignment leads to a conflict, it can be painful.
See, thanks. Let me take one more question from the YouTube. And there is feedback for this question. Thank you. Conflict management is one of the daily events that one has to go through. Thank you, Artabaz, for the inputs that you shared. And the question here as well is that what methods have you used or incorporated regarding design thinking within the team or wider group? Yeah, maybe general, what's your experience with design thinking? What do you use something of this approach?
So so at BlaBlaCar, I think we are lucky because our CPO is a former designer, and we have a big let's say we have maybe a rather big design culture compared to other companies. The things that we've put in place, so in the process, I would say it's really about having the user and the user research being really at the center of what you built. And there was, I mean, just to illustrate that, it happened like before we really implemented a strong culture. It would happen that some features would be shipped and without being shown to a user or without being shared with the user, and that doesn't happen. I mean, for a long time, it doesn't happen anymore. So I think that's part of the things, but. It looks obvious, but actually it requires a lot of work to ensure that each single feature, each single thing that you share, that you ship, is actually shared and validated with with the proper process. Another thing that we did actually was to put in place, and that's again at the initiative of our CPO, is to put in place a design system. And so that's more, it's really something on the UI part, but it's interesting because actually it removes from product designers and from a lot of people the fact of having to think of those aspects and then focusing more on the experience, So I think that when you don't have a design system, actually you may spend a lot of time on UI considerations or on UI debates, which can be time consuming, which are maybe not maybe for some people they are super interesting, but in the day-to-day business, they are not the most interesting debates. I think it's more interesting to, think of user experience and user journey. So I think doing that and, removing that complexity and those debates also really help free up time for a more design approach, I would say.
And by design system, you mean like basically the rules, what we do and what we don't do in our UI, that we don't need to discuss each button, but they're already certain.
Exactly.
Clear
the
rules.
button and the font and the colors and the titles, and I mean it's all of that. It's there's work that has been done also on the tone of voice and how you should how you can speak, what words you can use, not use. So it's also a big part of that. Actually, is also the work on content and how we speak to our members. And I think all of that, creating framework and guidelines is they always say that that constraints are good for creativity, and I think that that's the case, that it's an investment into building a system, and the system is, when you build it, it's a bit rigid, but it gives you a lot of freedom to think about other things and more important things.
Thanks. There is very interesting question more in YouTube. For a new person in the role of PM, how to control the urge of coming to a solution and rather work on understanding the problem when this is not natural to you? Is there a method or framework you recommend? And I guess many of us can relate. It's natural that we want to, like, we see a solution and we say, yeah, let's just go there. But how do you prevent this from happening?
So I think there are ways to prevent it, and then there's also a magic solution to still move forward with the solution, but be more successful, maybe. So I'll talk about both. One of them is, so the first one, I think, is there's maybe what I'm going to say is a bit obvious, but make sure that you speak about problems and not solutions. And so when you have a solution in mind, it's okay to have a solution in mind, but walk back up to the problem. And what we do at BlaBlaCar is that we ask our teams to write down a success criteria. So, whether it's a solution or whatever, we always say, okay, if this project is successful, what is the metric that will move? What is the metric that you're trying to move? And when you do that, actually you have a different conversation, because you're not about like, okay, is this a problem or a solution? You're more like, okay, in the end, what's the impact that you're looking to have? Okay? So I think that looking at impact, and it's also a great way to align people, because people can much more easily align on things that we want to impact than on how to impact them. So I'd say my key recommendation is, whatever the starting point, whether you started with the problem or with the solution, try to formulate a success criteria, like, and how you will measure the impact. And then I think like it's okay to to think of solutions, because if you try the product, if you do normally, if you're a PM and you're using your product and you're talking to customers, you will have tons of solutions in mind, and that's fine. I think what's the one way to frame them is to frame them more as hypotheses, and try to start your solution to say, okay, it's not a solution, it's a hypothesis. I have a hypothesis that if we do this, this will change. And then try to work from there. Try to look, okay, I have a hypothesis. Why do I have this hypothesis? If I go into data, will I find something that will confirm this, this hypothesis, etc., etc. So I think that can also help frame the conversation in something that's more around outcome and impact, and not around the solution.
Cool. Thank you so much. I am seeing that there are no more questions at the moment, which means that event is not over. We are staying in Zoom, but we will be ending the live stream part. Let me just quickly share a few last closing words. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight, today, whatever the time is that you were here with us. If you want to continue discussion, please join our chat on Telegram. It's Get Product People. If you want to support us in running these events, because these events we run as on our free time as volunteers. So if you want to help us run this with proper tools, we have a Patreon where you can chip in with a small contribution. And we hope to see you again at the next events in the next Tuesday or any Tuesday afterward. And please also have a look at our previous sessions that are recorded and are present on YouTube. Thank you all so much. If you want to join our discussion on Zoom, which will last for another 10 minutes or so, more informally, please do so. If not, see you next time. Thank you. And we are staying here. Otkar will now stop the live stream.
Yeah, I'll just